Hello everyone, and welcome back to Wonder of Faith. As always, I'm Anthony Bush, and today we'll continue our exploration, our dialogue with the Oculus. Last time we talked about individualism and the clear distinction between the Catholic understanding of that word and the modern understanding of that word. And to follow from that idea, from that understanding, I think it's important and right that we continue into understanding community. Because I think you cannot have an understanding of the individual without, of course, having an understanding of communion and community. And it's important because if you have an understanding of the person, of the singular individual, that will necessarily lead into how you understand the community. And so you can't really talk about one without talking about the other. So then let us talk about the other side of the coin for both the Catholic and the modern sense of the term. So we've established, and I think it's important to kind of reverse and lay and talk about the already laid groundwork to understand how these ideas continue to unfurl themselves. So in the modern sense, right, we have individuality, very self-oriented, right? We've covered that. And even when something seems altruistic or seems to be otherly, it's always contextualized towards the self, right? If I'm doing something for someone else, it's for a personal goal. So even whenever it's externalized, it's still for the sake of the self. While when something in the Christian context is done for someone else, it's for their own good. They are seen as an ends in themselves. It's not for some selfish reason, right? So in the Christian model, something can be done for someone else and be for them. It is possible for something to be extroverted for the extroverted reason in itself, while it seems for the modern world, because of materialism, because there is no shared outside experience, there is no metaphysics, it seems that something even that is extroverted, it all comes back to the self, because everything is just materialist. Everything is just atoms, or everything is just, blood, bones, guts, all of the above. So everything is just a matter of the will. What I want is what I get. What they want is what they get, and there's just will, so on, so on. And wonderful thinkers have talked about this already. You have Bishop Barron especially, who has done videos on how thinkers of the 1800s and 1900s have shaped our current political ideas and social ideas. And I would very much call on you to go look at those, because he does an excellent job of explaining that. And I'm drawing on that to kind of explain this dichotomy once again, especially within the Oculus framework. So when we have that understanding of the individual and the individual's relationship to the other, then we have to blow that scale up, right? So now it's not just the individual with the other, relationship between two people. How does that build into a large scale, complicated connection between people? So it's not just one person to another, it's now one person to another, and they to other, till you get a large scale body, maybe and enter, a group of friends, and then maybe a town, up to a nation, right? So community has many levels to it. And in this sense, the singular person and the nation share many characteristics, right? How the one acts and how the nation act, it's going to build on one another. You can't really say that they're completely separate, they have nothing in common, because just how we talk about in Christianity, the body of Christ will say when one hurts, the whole hurts, right? You cannot disconnect those two. And whether modernity, I keep saying modernity, it's important to say here and now, especially here early in the video. I am very much generalizing, and it's very difficult, of course, for me to be overly particular, right? Because whenever we're talking about modernity, there's billions of people on this earth. It's hard for me to be overly specific, because of course there's going to be people with different ideas about the world, about themselves, about what happens after they die, about government, politics, so on and so on. So whenever I talk about modernity, quotation mark, trademark, so on, I am being overly general. But what I generally mean by modernity or contemporary ideas, I'm taking a Western pluralistic conceptualization of the world that has shied away from making too many metaphysical claims. So I think you see it a lot, especially, I'll come out and say it, on the social left, these sorts of people who often are afraid or antagonistic towards religion because they see religion as a force that's trying to make them not be themselves, or that's trying to stop them from expressing themselves. And so they just want everyone to do the quote on you do you, or stop telling me what to do with my body and stop telling me how to live or feel. Those sorts of people, that's what I'm mainly talking about. That sort of worldview and kind of the logical conclusion of where that goes. And I'm now talking about the kind of communities that they want, right? And kind of what would happen if we take their idea of community to its final ends versus the Catholic understanding of community to its final ends. Because I think it's important. We're in a very important time, kind of a transitional time, because this is the point where whose worldview is going to be taken to its conclusion. Because I'll be honest with you, I don't think I'm personally not naive enough to realize, to think that in the future the world is going to be more Christian than it is now. I have definitely accepted, especially in the Western world, in the Northern Hemisphere, that Christianity is dying because we're in a world who thinks Christianity is old-fashioned or for the uneducated. And so I definitely think kind of this new liberalism, this new social liberalism is going to be a stronger force in the world, is going to have more political influence. And it definitely has more influence in the culture. We see it in commercials, we see it in movies, and so on. So I definitely want to talk about where that may lead, and then how, if you are a Catholic watching or a Christian watching, how we respond to that, or what our counterexample would look like, and why it is a better example, or why we should prefer our ideal over the modernist ideal. Okay, now with that out of the way, now we can kind of explain the differences. Okay, so when we get to the communal level, I think the main distinction I'm going to make between the two is a community of the modern, and at this point I will say postmodern community, is a community of apathetic individuals making a community of an apathetic community versus a community of loving individuals making a community of true love. And I don't use that L word lightly. I think a lot of times you see people on YouTube say that love a lot. I say that word a lot, love. And I hear it all the time. If only the world were a more loving place. So many people are spreading hate out there and they're making people feel bad. And if only we had more love in our heart than hate, then the world would be such a better place. I've heard that sort of talk over and over again. And it sounds so lovely, it warms the heart, right? But it's so vague, and it signifies basically nothing, and thus makes no difference in the world, sadly. I think the intention is good, right? For when someone says that, they have good intentions, and I can applaud that. But as a philosopher, as someone who doesn't want good intentions only, but wants to see good in the world, I can't applaud those terms because they don't mean anything. They don't forward any sort of truth. And ergo, we have to say, what does love mean, right? And why is person A's idea of love correct or incorrect? And why is person B's idea of love dangerous or actually the antithesis of love? And then furthermore, why is love so important and central to the building of a healthy and useful understanding of community? So these are all questions I think we should answer when we're talking about community, and we're going to do so now. So firstly, let's talk about love. And let's talk about love as it's understood in the Catholic tradition. And I am going to start with the fundamental understanding as Thomas Aquinas states it. And that idea of love has been used probably in the Catholic tradition since he introduced it. Simply put, kind of the equation is love is willing the good of the other. Simple as that. There's the sentence. Let's turn off the lights and go home. There it is. Love is willing the good of the other. And I want to point out something immediately that is absent from that statement. The active term there is will. The will, in Thomas Aquinas' understanding of the person, is separate from the intellect, is separate from the passions. In a healthy human being, you have intellect, will, passions. And in disordered human being, you have the passions ruling the will, ruling the intellect. It's flipped. So healthy human being, intellect, will, passions. Unhealthy human being, passions, will, intellect. Hallmark love, Valentine's Day card love would probably fall into what category? Intellect or passions? I think we would all agree it's passions. Emotional. But Aquinas puts it dead in center, will. And if we were to ask him if he was alive today, which he can hear us now, he's praying for us, interceding for us in heaven, he would tell us, well, love that's rightly ordered, true love, is the will being led by the intellect. Intellect, what's it do? It's leading us through truth to know what's good, and then the will takes what's good and true and then drives us towards that. So ergo, love is not really a matter of emotion at all. It's a matter of coming to know what is true and good and then putting it into action with the will. Which makes sense, right? We have Christ here on the cross, and this action, this ultimate action of sacrifice, of love, is obviously not an emotional one. No one who's all lovey and dovey inside would allow themselves to be crucified, impaled through the hands and the feet and suffocate on the cross for hours until they die. Especially God of all existence, right? Who humbled himself to become a man. So the very Christian definition, the Christian example of love is not an emotional act, but an act of true will, of desire with the intellect, knowing this would save all, right? So if this is what love is, ultimately, and this is the Christian example of love, sacrifice, knowing it is what it will ultimately be good for them, good for the other. Well, that's great. And notice once again, it seems to be completely devoid of self-orientation. It's other-oriented. I'm doing it for you. And yes, I may be gratified by that. Yeah. I am so happy that I did what I could for you and you become better because of it. You're more virtuous because of it. Yes, there is that gratification, but that is not the primary goal. I want to make that distinction because there are some people out there who say, well, you may have done it because you made them better, but you still got something out of it because you feel good now. So you never really were selfless. There's no such thing as selflessness because you got an endorphin rush, which I think that's a bit pessimistic. And I want to point out the intention, there is a such thing as a primary intention. And the primary intention of the self should always be the good of the other. And if that's the primary intention, that is true selflessness, that is true love. And that is following the example of Christ. Okay? Think of a community built on that. And you have true community, healthy community. Community believers. That's what the church is supposed to be. So let's shift our attention to see if a modern concept of community really follows that. And I don't even think you have to look at the modern community. I think you can go back and see any time a secular power has tried to create community, it doesn't usually work that way. I think any empire, it's through coercion, right? The big soldier army comes in, they beat the smaller army, and then through either enslavement or aggression or blackmail, whatever you have it, they use their will. So there's the will, right? The will is still there. Maybe even the intellect's involved. But it ain't the good. It's not the other, the good of the other they're worried about. It's their own good that they're worried about. And I wouldn't call it capital G good either. It's it's animalistic. It's still passionable because, think of I'm trying to think of a good example. I don't know. It's like whenever you corner an animal and it's like a rabid animal and it's like baring its teeth at you and it's just like ready to pounce, like it's ready to rip someone's arm off because its instincts, it's all it can think about. It's not going to stand up on its legs and start reasoning with you like a diplomat, right? It's just an animal. It doesn't have that intellectual capacity, and we are human beings, but we're also animals. Thomas Aquinas, he defined it as a rational animal. That reason, that intellect is what separates us from the other mammals. We're still animals, but we have the intellect. We have rational souls, and that's what separates us from the other animals. That's what makes us unique. But we're still animals. Those instincts still exist. That savagery still exists. And if you've ever taken a history class, that's not easy to prove. I mean, that is very easy to prove with how savage human beings can act. Even very orderly ones, as any imperial, army can show. So, they come to town, they take the town, they kill a few people, they pillage, and they move along, right? Well, we don't do that anymore, but I think we still do it intellectually. We don't end up killing anyone, but we still come in with our will, and we absolutely obliterate people if they don't agree with us. So, look at Twitter. I think Twitter is the perfect example. So we've decided we're not going to kill people, but we're definitely going to replace killing them with a sword with killing them with cancel culture. Let's talk about cancel culture for a second, because this seems to be the building block of choice for modernity. If you have opponents, you can either try to reason with them, see their arguments. If they disagree with you, you can try to get them to see your way. If they don't do that, you can agree to disagree. You could revisit them at a different time. The Enlightenment understanding was, well, if they disagree with you, if they're a minority, give them a voice, let them live their life, let them vote. That's fine. They're a minority. They had this idea of majority rule. And we still have some of that, the United States at least, the Constitution was written during the Enlightenment time. So we still have that. And people talk about it still. But this idea of the will being paramount, I think is starting to overrule that culturally. Our institutions are locked into that Enlightenment concept because it's very difficult to amend the law. And so the law is kind of frozen in time there. But on Twitter, if enough people realize they don't like something, then they can paint something as outrageous or obscene, and then they'll go in and just paint a narrative. This person offended someone, or this is absolutely abhorrent to me. Oh my gosh, they're a villain. I'm a victim. They need to be done away with. Off with their head, allegorically. And then outcry. And then the outcry is strong enough, they may be able to get moderators of Twitter or whatnot to ban them. So, and then they're silenced, and then their ideas are killed with it, and then no one can hear their ideas. The platform that they were able to speak is gone, and then once again, the allegorical guillotine has been used. So no blood is shed, but the modern means by which power is distributed is still being used. We've evolved in the sense that we don't kill people anymore. But we haven't evolved in the sense that the same old tricks or the same old way that power dynamics work in the human race haven't really changed. It's the same old game over and over again. But notice that this idea of willing the good of the other is completely devoid in the modern discourse. That is the last thing on people's minds. And so then, how was community built in modern times then? It definitely happens, right? We have communities. That's kind of part of human nature. We humans love community. That's how we get anything done. Well, I think once again, there's a way, and we always unite behind a cause. The passions love to be, it's like the passions are like fire, like anything to stoke the fire, right? And the passions light right up, and they stoke the will to action. Well, if the passions are ignited enough, if you get enough people's passions ignited, then they'll coalesce together and they'll move as one. So you have to unite a people behind an enemy, I'm afraid. Someone has to be a scapegoat. And that's the main distinction, I think, between the community of the modern world and the community of the Christian world. And once again, I'm making this distinction. Christians are just as guilty of this. Many times, Christians have fallen into the same trap. Christians can scapegoat the wrong kinds of people. I think many Christians in history did it to Jews, and when I say Christians, I don't mean the church proper, not the hierarchy or the church and its teachings. I mean uneducated Christians on the ground who decided they have a bone to pick with Jews, who they think for some reason are responsible for killing Jesus, even though it's 1,000 years later and they want to do away with them. I'm talking about those types. And that distinction is not often made in gotcha Christian videos. They think, Christianity's doing bad, or the Catholic Church is doing bad because Catholics were still abusing Jews 1,000 years later after Christ, which is not fair, because the main mistake I see in those sorts of things is you have to separate the actions and beliefs of individuals from the official teachings of the Catholic Church proper, because Catholicism is a big place. Today there are over 1 billion Catholics. So yes, there are Catholics even today who will weaponize Catholic teaching and do things that are certainly against the teachings of the church and say it's perfectly fine to once again find that enemy and twist the faith in order to get something accomplished that as an ulterior motive. It happens, sadly. I wish all Catholics were perfect saints, but Lord knows I'm not, and Lord knows they aren't either. But Catholic teaching pretty consistently was very lenient towards Jews. At the very least, did not want them to be murdered, killed, or abused for their status as Jews. But back to this point, Christians played the scapegoat game as well. The Nazism is the textbook example, right? And Judaism, among others, homosexuals, disabled people, are all scapegoats in order for the Nazi state to keep together until it collapsed under military force. But those same tactics are used now by secular modernist types. It's just not in the same form. It's not using militaristic power. It's using sophistic rhetoric on Twitter, on Facebook, on the news, on YouTube even. And it's hard not to get involved, because this is the world we live in. You're here watching me on YouTube, I'm here posting on YouTube, and it's hard not to listen to it, because you can't just live in a box. You can't live in the forest. And just like St. Augustine said, in the city of God, it's hard to live in the city of God, be a part of Christ's kingdom here on earth, and not be of the city of men. You often overlap. You have to live amongst both. And that's why we have the church, right? We receive the sacraments, we as Catholics, not so that we can isolate ourselves or hide away from the world. But as Vatican II was trying so hard to teach us and to articulate, but that we can weather the storms of what the world throws at us while sanctifying it. So we need to remember what it means to be part of the church. Remember what it means to be Catholic. Remember what it means to be faithful. And in the process, go out and have others understand as well. So I have full belief that it's possible to build a Christian community. It doesn't mean we're going to build a Catholic state with a Catholic government. That's not at all, in my mind, possible anymore. The world is too globalized. But it does mean, when we go to Mass at our local parish and see each other after Mass, or, maybe you go to join the Knights of Columbus and have a Knights of Columbus meeting, or go to a youth group meeting, or start a little hobby group with your fellow Catholics. You start small, right? You start your little Catholic community group, a hobby group, and you get together and you share in that hobby or activity, and you share in your Catholicism. and you love one another truly, you will their good. You will the good of the other with your friends, with your families in those groups. And you have someone to lean on, right? And then as that group grows, as you have those little enclaves of friends and family you can count on to see the world as you do, then you can slowly go out and have, into the world knowing you have a foundation. You have a strong oak tree to lean on whenever the world gets you down. When others don't understand or have a clue about how you see the world or how you see the sacraments, And it can be jarring because, as I hope we've established right now in Oculus, the modern view and the Catholic view are quite asunder, quite apart. There's little overlap at this point. But there's hope nonetheless. And in fact, I think the next video in Oculus will be on hope, given perhaps the dire view the dire picture we painted thus far. But no, if you have any questions about community or you wish to discuss this topic further, please do leave some comments below, and I'll be reading them and ask questions, and I'll try to respond to them. As always, I've been Anthony Bush. Please pray for me as I pray for you. May you find final victory in Christ, and may you be fully inspired by the wonder of God. God be with you.